Okay, so Nathan, you have recently been appointed as Chief Commercial Officer at Iceotope. So the obvious place to start probably is a little bit of background on yourself, your career to date, how you arrived at Iceotope.
Sure. Well, I didn't begin my professional career in IT, but when I did, I started at HP and began primarily in sales, working in the SMB market in the US. Out of that, I developed some skill sets in terms of outbound calling and managing a team to go chase a new market, something that is a rather challenging thing being a hunter. So eventually moved from that role into a wider role managing what we call the mid-market space in the US, which is that space between the largest enterprise customers and the smallest customers, so that kind of in-between market. And moved from there then into the OEM space, which is when companies take the hardware primarily that is produced by a company like HP, and they use it in some new way other than just standard IT usage. So examples being, they could create an MRI machine or a CT scanner for the medical industry, and they use the compute to create the graphics that the doctor would use to read the scan. Or you may use it in a kiosk, or you may use it in any other place where it's used in a new or adapted way. So at HP, I did that for some years before I was recruited to Lenovo to begin a similar business there. And Lenovo had just recently purchased the x86 business from IBM. And so they were looking to rationalize an inherited OEM business on the server side and then begin a new business on the PC side that they had never done before. And so I came in to help with that for a few years. And then right before the pandemic hit, I transitioned out of that part of the business into a global role, working as the chief of staff to the chief customer officer for the infrastructure solutions group at Lenovo, which is the server, storage, networking, data center side. And I did that throughout the pandemic. And then most recently was the running strategy and transformation in North America for the ISG group. So had multiple experiences both in the Western Hemisphere as well as globally in both HP and Lenovo.
Okay, and I'm wondering, did you bump into Iceotope? Because I know they have relationships with some of the server manufacturers. Is that how you made the initial contact? So is that how you got the opportunity to join?
Yeah, when I was at Lenovo in the OEM business, we were exploring alternative cooling technologies. And that was still a rather early stages of that time. So we were looking at what was available out there and trying to see if that was something that would be usable within the ecosystem of Lenovo's server group. It was actually right after I left that then I ran into the Iceotope technology that had been added into the thermal lab at Lenovo, and was quite surprised by the elegance of it as compared to everything else that we had been looking at from a especially liquid cooling perspective. And so that's how I first encountered it, and was quite enamored by it when I saw it. And that was 3 years ago now.
Okay, and in terms of the actual jump, if you want to share or if you don't, but the actual decision to move to, I said, obviously you say you're a fan of the sort of liquid cooling solution. Was it that or the culture that got time to move on? Just any sort of explanation as to how you finally arrived at Iceotope?
Yeah, it was a combination of enthusiasm for the technology, the realization that the technology was like Iceotope, or at least an alternative cooling technology, was going to become a necessity in the market, and then my personal passion towards sustainability as something that we actually have to do something about, not just carbon offsets and asking people to plant seedlings in the Amazon rainforest to make up for all of the carbon I'm pumping into the atmosphere, but instead actually materially reducing carbon footprint really excited me. And so you put some personal passion with forward-looking technology and something that I think is going to be market moving, and that was the reason that I felt incentive to chase after this role, and now to join the company in this role as Chief Commercial Officer.
Okay, and in terms of that title, I mean, it can cover a multitude of sins. So is it, I mean, is it a brand new, I can't remember if they had a previous chief commercial officer, and so if it's a brand new post, is it for you to shape it as you want, or have you got some fairly sort of strict guidelines as to what you're expected to just, yeah, what do you see the role, what do you see as the role?
Yeah, it is an expansion role that they had not previously had before, and it comes as part of the scale out of the organization. That after another funding round, the company was able to make some investments that included this role, and the focus really is on all the external constituencies. So today, when I began, the company was very centric on development of the intellectual property and the technology. And my role is really to start interfacing with all the external constituents that will help make this a reality in the marketplace. So that obviously includes customers and general sales, but it includes also then all of our marketing, our brand messaging, our demand generation, as well as then all of the ancillary relationships and partnerships we have out there with companies that are influencers, companies that are going to help change the way the market thinks about cooling, which includes data center infrastructure providers, includes IT technologists like Intel or AMD, and it includes integrators and other companies that actually put things together or do installations or provide services. So anything, again, that's externally focused is really in scope for what I'm being asked to do for the company.
Okay, and I mean, it's fairly early days, I guess, but have you already got to grips with what you think the company does well? And I won't say, contrasting what they do badly, because I'm sure they don't, but have you identified areas, as you say, maybe the external facing bit, the marketing, etc., but areas where you think you can add value, particular value to help them, expand their presence?
Yeah. I'd say, like so many things with us personally, the probably the greatest strength is maybe the greatest weakness, and that is it's an engineering company founded and primarily focused on engineering. We have some of the best engineers in the industry from every level of it, mechanical to thermal to materials and everything in between. And that means that it's just an outstanding technology top to bottom, and has been recognized as such by all the patents that have been created and the buzz that we get in the marketplace when people see it. But on the flip side, that has created a weakness, which is engineers by nature like to engineer things. They don't necessarily go out and trumpet what they're doing from the mountaintops for everyone to hear about. And so Iceotope had been doing amazing things within the part of the industry that is creating governing bodies and standards within the industry, and going to trade shows with folks that are relatively focused on that part of the industry, on infrastructure within the data center, but the larger marketplace hadn't had a chance to hear about it. And so again, that's where my role comes in. I think that's my value add, is being able to create a brand positioning that helps people to understand exactly what Iceotope does and the value it adds, and the messaging that goes around that. So we can start touching customers who are looking for a solution, but they don't even know how to articulate the solution they're looking for. They just know that they have a series of problems they want to solve, and they don't, my job is to connect them then to this technology that does exactly what it is they're hoping for. So that really is the transformation of the brand and the company, is from being just an engineering company to a fully developed global entity that is able to produce results in every region.
And maybe just a bit more generally, I mean, you've worked in the IT space for a while. So what would you see as the main challenges and opportunities for companies like Iceotope? You might call them sort of digital infrastructure enablers, because on the one hand, we have this sort of continuous push and expansion of the digital world that we are all embracing. But you mentioned earlier your passion for sustainability. It's not immediately obvious that the two are completely compatible. So how do you see that, as I say, the challenges for companies like Iceotope and also the opportunities?
Yeah. Well, I think the first challenge is always the status quo. When you have something that's innovative and revolutionary, there's going to be a slowness by a majority of people to want to adopt it because there's fear, there's uncertainty. No, very few people want to be the first mover. They want someone else to take the first step. So that, and the status quo in this case means, can we make our fans bigger? Can we, find ways of cooling very hot things better with more airflow or better airflow or increased temperature variance or things like that. So I think that's going to be the first challenge to overcome. But the reality is that there are these pressures that have developed in the market and are coming to a head now. They've been brewing for some time, and we've known that they've been there. And I think as we enter the middle of the 2020s, we're going to see them start to erupt. And that includes things like sustainability, where companies are beginning to look at what is their impact on the environment, what are their ESG goals if they have them, what are the pressures from consumers or customers that are looking to partner with organizations that meaningfully do take seriously the idea that we have to reduce our carbon footprints. So you start with that, which means you have to change the way you do IT, especially for companies that are IT reliant for the product or service they develop. You put that in also then from a practical business perspective, the increasing cost of electricity in many regions, the need to reduce the amount of water that is being consumed within data center environments. And you put those together just from an operational expense perspective, and you say, if I'm the CFO, I must materially reduce the amount of money we're spending on these resources. We've got to find an alternative way of providing our goods or services in our IT environments. And then you continue down the road of saying know that we're going to continue. The technology is just going to get hotter. The CPUs are getting beefier and hotter. The GPUs are getting hotter. The memory DIMMs are getting hotter. The power supplies are getting hotter. And we're going to reach a certain, well, we already have actually reached the threshold at the upper end of the echelon in high performance computing and AI and inferencing in that part of the market, where there just is not enough cold air you can blow through a server in order to cool it. And what you end up doing is you lose performance as a result. Your performance throttles down. And so you end up spending money on latent capacity because you just simply can't cool it fast enough. So when you start putting those together and then wrap around that government entities that are beginning to put pressure on the IT industry to become less of a burden on both the ecosystem from an electricity consumption, but also on the carbon footprint. Now you've got external pressures coming as well on companies. So you put all that together, and I think that's what is going to help overcome the status quo of trying to blow more air over hot components.
And in terms of the sort of success, I suppose, of Iceotope, do you think that clearly the company has its own sort of agenda things to do, but working with people like Lenovo and other server manufacturers, is the power of collaboration, if you like, is that what's going to get this message across and get people to change attitudes? It's much easier to do that, as a combined entity rather than to say Iceotope sort of trying to give a message here and somebody over here. If many of the IT hardware vendors are seen to be on board with the innovative liquid cooling folks, that's the perfect storm, if you like.
It is. I agree. And I think it's about bringing together the total ecosystem to solve this top to bottom. It definitely will take the server OEMs and ODMs who are designing and manufacturing the next generation of hardware. They have to be, they will be forced, whether they want to or not, to begin adopting alternative cooling technologies, and that's only going to accelerate, partially because they'll be driven by that hotter components and partially because of consumer demand. And those two things are definitely going to influence that part of the market. But we also need to then be partnering with the data center infrastructure parts of the market, the folks who are developing the actual ecosystems within data centers. We need to be partnering with parts of the market that are out on the edge and developing technologies there, not just in terms of just general edge, but specifically telcos, as an example, where they're trying to adapt to 5G and already thinking about 6G technology and what that's going to imply and how they're going to be able to manage that amount of data in such a dispersed environment. You're going to you're going to see the other parts of the market that are the hyperscalers, who, the large ones such as Google and Amazon and Meta and companies like that are going to drive behaviors because they're first adopters on many technologies that then trickle down into the rest of the enterprise marketplace. So I think you're going to see that entire ecosystem all come together and converge around this idea that compute, as we developed it back in the 1980s and 90s in the x86 platforms, is just no longer going to be what we had always imagined it to be. It's got to innovate and it's got to adapt. And I think that's where Iceotope is uniquely positioned at the center of that, to link all of those disparate parts of the market together under a technology that is familiar, but yet innovative, so that it solves all those problems that each of those entities is trying to solve for, whether it's power consumption, whether it's sustainability, whether it's high performance compute or edge environments. Iceotope's able to bring together all of those entities.
Okay, and maybe just in finishing, so you said your role is there to sort of help the company expand its footprint, I guess, and presence. So, I mean, again, you can't, and I'm sure you can't give me any secrets away, but are you able to share any sort of insights as to what might be on the roadmap for, the rest of the year into the future? I mean, the technology, obviously, I'm fairly familiar with it, so I guess that's well established, but I don't know if there are any sort of tweaks or innovations there, but is it more about, as you say, growing the company's presence in different markets and stuff? Just anything you're able to share.
Yeah, I think the number one thing you're going to see differently is that Iceotope is defining itself differently than the market maybe has in the past. In the past, we've talked about there being the direct-to-chip cold plate technologies that are out there that are filled with water and provide a liquid cooling loop as an alternative technology, but generally are hybrid, that you're also blowing fans at the same time to cool alternative components. And then there are immersion technologies, which generally rely upon some sort of tank or some large, metal bathtub, in essence, that you fill in its entirety with dielectric fluid. And we just simply refer to that as immersion. But what Iceotope does is neither of those. Iceotope is a unique technology, and you'll start hearing more of us referring to ourselves as precision liquid cooling. And the reason that we're precision liquid cooling is because, unlike a tank that simply swirls liquid around completely immersed servers, or unlike a cold plate technology that relies upon water, which obviously we don't necessarily want touching our IT, but also it's still hybridized with air. Our technology delivers the exact amount of fluid, of dielectric fluid, onto each component to provide maximum cooling and energy consumption, so that we can do that inside of a standard rack chassis that we're used to using, vertical racks that are then easily serviceable, because we don't use fluid that fills the entire chassis. We only use a small amount of fluid that barely covers the bottom of the chassis, so that you can pull the rack out, you can open the cover, you can replace DIMMs or memory or hard drives or whatever you need to service it, just like you would in a standard data center environment. So that's part of the precision of that liquid cooling, is that it eliminates the variances of hot spots around the server chassis. It eliminates the failure rates of fans, which is your highest failure rate. So you're going to see all of that messaging start to amplify itself into market under the Iceotope brand of precision liquid cooling. So we're going to be doing that, amplifying that throughout the IT ecosystem, as I mentioned, working with the OEMs and the ODMs, partnering with companies like Intel and AMD. You're going to see more and more of our presence there. You're going to see the data center infrastructure environment embracing us in a different way, and not just lumping us under immersion cooling as an alternative. We really are a unique offering to the market, and we're going to position ourselves as such and amplify that.
Okay, now that's interesting. So I guess the focus on liquid cooling full stop is helpful in general terms, because it's a new way of doing things. But you're saying that the potential users need to start getting more sophisticated and understanding there are different ways of doing things, and that clearly benefits of different technologies. So that's you want to within that market. It's not just like everyone grows. You actually do want to sort of emphasize the fact that you're doing something slightly different and more, as you said, well, precision is the word you use. So it's giving people the sort of maximum return on investment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It's amazing the number of advantages the isotope technologies process can bring into an ecosystem, whether that be on the edge where you have a sealed chassis that's easily hot swappable, but also fully serviceable if you'd like. That it reduces your energy consumption by up to 40%. So you can see that can be material to a large telco, especially where you have thousands and thousands of sites that suddenly become easily serviceable, and yet the longevity of your IT out there increases dramatically because you're not exposed to the particulate and heat and humidity of the environment. You're going to see within the data center, the scalability and serviceability are going to become a major factor where you can increase your density dramatically, because it doesn't matter what's on the top of the rack and what's on the bottom of the rack, because you're not worried about the ambient heat rising in the room anymore. It gives you that, again, full serviceability where you simply slide it out on the rails and open it up and do what you need to do and pop it back in, just like you would any air-cooled server today. All of those things are going to increase the ROI dramatically. They're going to change the total cost of ownership dramatically as you're doing your calculations as to how you can invest. The amount of footprint you require to do the IT now decreases, which also helps your carbon footprint, because you no longer have to build bigger buildings and use those materials and cool that space and all of those things together. So that's what I think is the disruptive nature of the isotope technology in the marketplace. And we want to be able to get megaphones out and amplify that message out into the market.
Okay, that's great. I mean, it's been lovely to chat to you, and I wish you every success in your new role. But for now, Nathan, thanks very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. It's been a pleasure.